lot of phases where capital gets deployed in a particular narrative. How important, first of all, if at all it is important, and if yes, then how important is it for a founder to align the project with the current narrative, right?
Yeah.
And I feel there are stages of alignment of narrative. You can't just every time, oh, now I'm crypto, now I'm like pivoting to AI, now I'm back in crypto, right? Not that sort of alignment.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fundamentals or the framework of your project should remain the same. But you know, I think it does make sense to shift your pitch based on whatever is going on with the market. You know, there's so many projects that I've seen that initially was one pitch, but then they ended up shifting into or they ended up building a completely different product. Like, so I think it's really important as a founder to be flexible and be able to pivot based on where the narrative is. And I think that's also Polygon's superpower as well, because initially when Polygon launched, it was just a Plasma solution. But then people, you know, Vitalik realized that Plasma isn't the way to scale Ethereum. So then it ended up shifting into a POS solution. But then Vitalik was saying how in order to actually scale Ethereum, you need like a roll-up solution, kind of like a ZK solution. Like ZK is the only way to scale on top of Ethereum. And, you know, Polygon was effectively able to pivot and acquire the right talent in order to build like a ZK roll-up solution. So I think it's really important as a founder to, you know, you don't have to stick to just one narrative. Like just because initially when you started a company it was one pitch doesn't mean that you cannot change it. Like you should definitely be flexible as narratives change and also as the market changes.
What were some things that you learned in the process of fundraising that you'd like new founders or people to learn or take away from this?
Yeah, number one, I think, is once you get a commitment, it's essential to close immediately as fast as you can, because the reality is that you never know where the market could go. And that was also the case with Polygon as well, where literally once we closed and, you know, got all the capital in, like maybe a month after or like 2 weeks after, the market had started to show signs of weakness. So rule number one is to close as fast as you can once you get a commitment. Number two is make it as easy as possible for investors to onboard. So, you know, the whole process of reviewing documents, you know, filling out the blanks for these investors, sending in the capital and such, you want to make sure that whole onboarding investment process is as smooth as possible. Because I've seen some investors in the past stumble where they would make the onboarding or investment process really tough, and eventually like it would take too much time to invest. So number two is just making the process as smooth as possible. And number three is, I guess, you know, follow the momentum. I think it's really important to generate momentum in order to close the deal. So I think it's really important to have a process. Like you should not be casual about, you know, raising capital or just talking to investors. Like if you are committed to raising capital, you should have a plan. Like you should have a list of investors that you want to speak to them within the same time frame, like within the week or 2 weeks or so, because then that you're able to build momentum.
What are some ways to build momentum, as you said?
So ways to build momentum is to talk to VCs at the same time, not to talk to them in a staggered way. So like I mentioned before, if you're committed to raising capital, you should have a list of investors you're going to talk to, and you should set up those calls immediately. And your number one priority at that week should not be anything else. Like you should only be focused on business development. I mean, on raising capital.
Got it. Warm intros are huge in the VC circle, right? Like it's always appreciated, or it always plays out in your favor when you approach an investor via a warm intro. Why do you think that culture is so dominant?
Because there's so many deals within the Web3 space. Like, you know, the reality is that 99% of these projects, 98% of these projects don't get funded. So it definitely helps a lot if you're able to get a warm introduction, because then you kind of stand out within the noise. Because the reality is that all these investors, especially the tier one investors, they receive like hundreds of decks, and it's really hard for them to filter out from what is good and what is bad. So if you're able to get an introduction from somebody that's reliable to that fund, then that definitely makes you stand out. And I think it's also kind of a test of you as a founder. Like you should be resourceful enough in order to get those introductions,
Right.
and to get introduced to the right people within
I
the
think
fund
this
as
point
well.
just screams the importance of networking, right? Like how do you reach and penetrate these right kind of circles?
Yeah, and that's necessary as a founder, right? Like when you're trying to close a deal, or if you're trying to find a partnership with another business or protocol, like you really need those networking skills, and that is tested when you are getting introductions to VCs as well.
When a founder is starting the fundraise, what are some documents that they should already prepare? Let's start.
I mean, number one, you should definitely have a pitch deck. In the pitch deck,
can you break down some slides, must-have slides in the pitch deck?
Yeah, pitch deck, you should definitely have a team page. Like for me, it's a huge red flag if the pitch deck doesn't have a team page, because honestly, at least for me, when I'm investing in these projects, they're very early stage projects.
Right.
So I understand that some of these ideas might change down the line, which is why, the team is really important. Like if they have the right background, if they have the right Web3 experience, then I'm confident that the team will be able to build something that's actually meaningful. So, team page is number one, most important. Number two, the problem that you're solving has to be very clear. You should be able to pitch your project with just one sentence. So I think, being able to explain, what the problem is and how your project is solving it is very important within the pitch deck. So number one is team slide, that like you absolutely need that. And then number two is highlighting what the problem is and how your project will be able to solve that.
Tokenomics?
Tokenomics, I think it does help to include it, but I wouldn't say it's absolutely necessary, because I think a lot of projects, they do have plans to launch a token, but may not necessarily know the exact tokenomics. They should include how they're planning to accrue value to the token. I think so in that sense, like tokenomics does really matter. Like they should highlight, how the token will accrue value.
Business plan,
roadmap, competitors also.
Right. Okay. Competitors is also important.
Yeah, competitors is definitely very important.
How important is to make, we've covered the content that needs to be there. How important is it to make the slides aesthetic? To make it stand out? Do you think that's important? I mean, you shouldn't put you shouldn't put paragraphs in a PowerPoint, and you should definitely get your close friends or like an angel investor or VC to review your deck before you send it out broadly to the public. I mean, if it's aesthetic, then amazing, but I wouldn't say it's like essential. Just make sure that it's very easy to read. Make sure there's not paragraphs in the pitch deck, and make sure that the pitch deck is between 10 to 15 pages, but not more than that. Because, VCs in general just won't read beyond 15 pages. Can you break down different types of pitches when a founder meets an investor, right? Like the first time, let's say there's a conference pitch, right? A conference or a meetup pitch, which is sort of similar to an elevator pitch, where you sort of just like introduce yourself, probably try to build a rapport, and just drop it slightly that, what the project is about, and then you hop on a call. Yeah. I've seen so many people in the space do this mistake where they just go out in the conference and there's probably a party, loud music, and they're like pitching the investor when they're not probably interested in hearing your entire business idea at the time, right? So that's one type of pitch. The second is probably like an elevator pitch where you just like a 2-minute quick thing similar to a conference thing. And another one is the proper pitch when you go on the call, right, for the fundraise. Can you break down these two types for us?
I think in order to do an elevator pitch / conference pitch, I think it's really important to keep in mind what your one sentence pitch is, and I think naturally everything will fall into place. So yeah, it's really important to master your elevator/conference pitch, like your 2-second pitch, your 2-minute pitch, because naturally then you'll be able to do like a 30-minute pitch.
Right.
I think it's really important, like when you have a 30-minute call, to not go straight into the pitch, but actually ask questions to the investor. Questions like, what is your general investment thesis? What is your ticket size? What kind of projects are you looking at? Because then you can kind of modify your pitch based on what they're specifically looking for. And you can also prioritize which investors are more important based on what your needs are. Because,
right.
If an investor only invests 50K, 100K, that probably doesn't matter as much versus an investor that could potentially invest 5 million. Right. So, I think some of the common mistakes that founders make is that they go into a call and then they start pitching immediately, but they should be asking questions to the investor first, like, 3 or 4 questions, so that they get a sense of what the investor is looking for, and then be able to modify the pitch so that it fits what they are looking for as well.
How frequently do you think a founder or a business development person should keep following up? And what is the point when it becomes annoying, right? Because you have to follow up very regularly, right? But what is a good way to put it politely, or like,
I think you should max follow up 3 times. I mean, the reality is that if an investor wants to invest in you, you most likely don't have to follow up. But I would say 3 times is the max amount of time, especially if they don't respond.
Right.
Yeah, then 3 is a max.
What are some common mistakes that you see as an investor that founders make, and that they should take care of?
Yeah, so I would say mentioning who else you're talking to is honestly doesn't really help. Okay. Like if somebody asks you who are your current investors in the round, I would see a lot of founders making the mistake of saying that, oh, we're speaking to XYZ investor.
Right.
Honestly, it doesn't help at all to say that you're speaking to other investors, because number one, that whoever is evaluating you will ask that investor, what are your thoughts on this project?
Right.
If they haven't committed yet, then likely they will pass. So, it doesn't really help your case. Or it could even be in a negative way as well, where maybe the investor misinterprets it and says, thinks that the other investor had invested, and then that really looks bad on you as a founder as well.
So unless and until you've closed an investor, received money, to not name drop.
Yeah. Name dropping just does not help at all. And that's for everyone. I think it's a rookie mistake.
Right.
But investors know everybody else. So don't name drop unless they've actually